You talked a lot about investment through that, and obviously capital is a big part of this. Bootstrapping is nothing new, but crowdfunding, I mean, that's obviously a very buzzy concept now, and we're seeing the growth. Do you think that's part of this conversation of new hubs growing? Is that something that's really part of this conversation?
I mean, I think crowdfunding is an exciting vehicle for starting companies, and I think that's because, traditionally, it was a scenario where if you wanted to get venture capital, you needed to be a business that had the potential of really outsized returns, okay? And if you didn't, if your business did not fit that model, forget it, you weren't going to get backed by VCs. But VCs, had the unsecured money that you could then raise that, didn't hit your credit record if it failed and that sort of thing. So if you didn't have that, then what did you have? You had friends and family. Well, a lot of people's friends and family don't have that much money to give you. You had credit cards, but that's like hugely risky. And so there was this big gap for really cool ideas, innovative ideas, that may not be the 10x type returns, but they're viable businesses. And they didn't have a source for capital, and yet they were really compelling. And I think that's what's so cool about this crowdfunding concept. There's a whole slew of ideas, some hardware sort of, physical tangible product type of ideas that may generate 2-3x returns, slower growth businesses, but very compelling businesses in their own right. So I think that's great. I think the other thing that's really cool about it, though, is it gives you this avenue to almost test an idea before you deploy a capital to it. So you put the concept out there, maybe a prototype of it, mock-ups of it, whatever it may be, and then you let the crowd decide whether this thing is actually interesting. And so you've essentially pre-sold it. And so you've actually made the whole business much more viable. The traditional capital market, it's a few partners who are sort of the arbiter of whether they think your idea is a good idea or not. And that's, they're essentially acting as a proxy for the market, but you don't need to do that anymore. You can actually ask the market, do you want this? And if you want this, put your money where your mouth is. That's a super compelling, avenue.
Yeah, I think there's probably no mistake that our economy stalling is timed with this obsession with entrepreneurship in our country. Do you think that can sustain? I mean, is this just a fashion we're going to have? If we're building for entrepreneurial and technology startup communities in our country, is this a short-term engine of the next 5 to 10 years, or is this a kind of a mind shift that you'd expect to change how we understand our economy?
Yeah, I mean, I think entrepreneurism broadly. So I think tech's a little bit different. We can circle back to that, but as a broad concept, yes, I think not just the downturn, but the way that people, professionals have been treated by sort of big corporations has left a lot of people recognizing that they're on their own. This traditional concept of loyalty and longevity in a company, it's gone. And I think people have recognized that is a path and you can go down that, but it's actually pretty risky as well. And so if you're willing to take risk, might you be better off risking on, gambling on yourself rather than gambling on somebody else? And I think it makes sense. Now, that said, you've got to be pretty passionate about your idea to want to do this, because it's a pretty lonely thing to do in the beginning. If you have some measure of success, things change. But in the beginning, everybody thinks you're nuts, and you're out there by yourself, and it's a really tough thing to do. Now, I think tech's a little bit different, because I think there is a little bit perhaps of fashion in tech, because people see people make money, and people want to go there, and you see that on, I have an MBA. You see that at business schools all over the place, and there's a sort of adage of like, well, when you see the MBAs rushing into tech, watch out. I mean, there's a little bit of truth to that, right? I mean, I think it scares me that people find this fashionable, because the reality of this is it's really, really hard. And if you're doing this because you think it's sexy, you're going to very quickly find out this is a slog. I mean, you have to slog it out every single day.
the correlates of the country, you know, in the 10 to 20 person range, has already had some success, has some customers, and now we're looking at that growth. What should, you know, the inevitable question of what do you need? What should governments and investors and nonprofits and individuals in any non-traditional market be looking to do to help the Apu Guptas of any other city and here?
In general, I ask that the people just stay out of the way. You know, don't create barriers for us, because we're going to grow and we're going to go really fast. And the more barriers you put up, the slower I can grow. The best thing that the city can do for me right now is just create a business climate that encourages companies like me to grow. But I don't need a lot of intervention from the city for what I do. Sure, there's tax policies here that could be more beneficial to businesses like mine. I think the city is trying to address those things. But for the most part, what I concern myself with on a daily basis doesn't touch the public sector. It really is about, how do I get great people to come work with us? How do we get brands and agencies to want to work with us? And how do we build great product? And that, to be honest, those are the things I care about. And not a lot's going to stand in the way of that.